Good morning.
Good morning.
So, when I took philosophy of religion, my professor said one of the main reasons or objections people have to the belief in God is the problem of evil. So the problem of evil goes like this. If you have an all-powerful, all-loving God, such a being would not allow evil to exist because they could prevent any instance of evil from ever occurring. So, since evil is bad, a good being doesn't allow a bad thing to happen. Then the second part of the argument, evil exists. Hard to argue against that. Therefore, God cannot exist because God wouldn't allow evil to exist. Now, there are a lot of, obviously, that's an old argument. People have come up with counters, many of which aren't great. So some of those are, well, evil's not a problem if you don't believe in an all-powerful God. So if you say God's not all-powerful, then you can have an infinite, ultimate conflict of good versus evil. So you have God fighting, like, let's say the devil is like the ultimate evil, and then they can go back and forth, and the state of the world is, the line of that conflict. That works. Evil's not a problem. You can then believe in God and go, oh yeah, evil exists, but that makes sense. But then you lose the all-powerful God. Well, you don't have to lose the all-powerful God. What if God doesn't care about people? If God doesn't care about people, then God can be all-powerful, made the world, people are suffering, it's not a problem to God, God doesn't worry about it. God doesn't seem very good in that instance. You can even have a lesser version of that where God only cares about some people. Now, as long as those people never suffer, you're fine. Still, because they're not suffering from evil, things are great for them, they're basically heaven on earth already. Still doesn't help if you believe in a God that cares for everyone. Now there is still an out there, but it requires a bit more thinking. So God, the way you have to attack the argument then is the idea that God would never allow evil to exist. So under what circumstances could God allow evil to exist? Well, if that evil is in some way necessary, so if the existence of that evil allows for a greater good to come later, in much the same way that in oil refinery or fossil fuel extraction, they burn an awful lot of fossil fuels doing that. They drive vehicles, those pumps are not manual. There's a lot of, fossil fuels are consumed in the production of more fossil fuels. If good is similar, in that you can, local temporary reductions in the amount of good can facilitate more good coming later on, then it is acceptable. Then you can understand God allowing evil to exist. So some of the ways this can happen is evil can exist as a teaching mechanism. Sometimes people learn things the hard way, and the hard way typically involves suffering. I know I had to touch hot things before I learned hot things are hot. Now, and there are many stories of people suffering, and then through their suffering, they recognize and go, oh, I can see the error of my ways. And then learn from that and now have a better understanding of the good. But there's still, and that's somewhat, that works a little bit, but you wonder, well, why did they have to learn the lesson in the first place? Why could God not just give people all the goodness so that they don't have to go through that suffering to get the good? Why can't they just get the good all at once? So the argument for why people cannot get all the good at once, why there has to be challenge, is the argument that free will is a really fantastic good that we have been given. And that this good can only exist if at the very least the possibility of evil exists. So it's not why then would we call free will an ultimate good that would have this hefty cost attached to it? So the reason we would say free will is this amazing gift that God has given us is because free will can elevate the kinds of good, all kinds of good, and make it better. So for a God who is wanting to maximize good, they can take, free will allows for a lesser good to become an even greater good. What do I mean by this? So meaning for there to be meaning, variation is required. Language is the form of multiple different, there are many words in a language. You cannot have a language of all one word. You need to stress things, have variation. And so when you say only one, so then any sentence you can say, or word, it contains meaning in isolation, but it only contains meaning in isolation if there are other words that other things that could have been said. So when I say hi half a dozen times, you know I'm giving you half a dozen greetings. If all I can ever say is hi, that becomes meaningless, because it couldn't have been otherwise. So the possibility that it could have been otherwise is necessary for meaning. And so this elevates good because you can understand and appreciate the meaning of a good thing. If you have a wall made of bricks and all of the bricks are perfect, we can go, oh wow, someone managed to make all identical bricks, laying them out perfectly together nicely. And we can understand and appreciate that's pretty impressive. And it is not, but that becomes not impressive, or you can't appreciate that or understand that if you can only ever have identical bricks that are always perfectly in line. It's why no one appreciates a perfect one. That you can't have variation in the number one. That's just not, it doesn't exist, so there's not meaning in there. You have to have variation for a thing to have meaning. And I was trying to come up with stories for this. And really it's something that doesn't translate well into an individual story. You have to think, for the most part, you have to think back to like any experience in your life when you've been given something or when you've worked to achieve it. And you understand and appreciate it more when you've worked to achieve it. IKEA furniture is very popular, and people value it and appreciate it more because they have to assemble it. And then they feel like, oh, this could have been different, this could have been a very bad thing, rather than just, here is something that is given to me in a perfect state. Or also people who win the lottery tend to go broke very quickly. Because it's not, I have earned this and I value this money in such a way. It's just like, boom, this is plopped on me, and then I don't treat it the same way. I don't appreciate it. Its value is not there. And so it's that possibility of variation is important. And that variation can only exist if we can, at the very least, contemplate and carry out evil. Then we can understand good is good, because it could have been evil. So I've been talking about quite a bit about evil, and I should probably explain, what do I mean by evil? So evil is not a thing in and of itself. You cannot have a lump of pure evil. What would that even be? Well, when you think of evil, you actually have to. You can't have evil in a vacuum. Then you just have a vacuum, and you can't only put evil into it. You have to put something good into that space, and then imagine something bad happening to it. So, like a person suffering, that's evil. That requires a person who is a very good thing as created by God. So evil is only ever a reduction, or a reduction in the amount of good, because a person is always a good. A person doing well, that's better. A person suffering, that's a reduction in the good experienced by the person. And so that's what I'm calling evil. It's essentially like cold. Cold isn't a thing in and of itself. You can't have a lump of cold. That's just an absence of heat energy. And so as we explain cold as a reduction in heat, evil is just a local reduction in good. It's not a thing in and of itself. And so the possibility of reduction means we can appreciate that it is not reduced. Sorry. As it relates to good. So we can understand then that good or evil as a consequence of people's actions. If you're willing to accept that free will is important for elevating the good, then, and free will can't exist if you can't have the possibility of evil. If you can't make the other choice, then that variation doesn't exist. And if there can be no consequences for the other choice, that variation that you needed for the language to appreciate the difference I was talking about earlier, that can't happen. So that's why you need to accept those consequences. And so that's how we can get rid of, or as a problem, moral evil. Now, moral evil is evil as a result of people's choices. That still leaves the question of, okay, fine, maybe there's a justification for moral evil, and I don't have to worry about the argument of evil. What about natural evil? When, say, a tower just falls and crushes some people. Or actions, or an earthquake, flood, things that, like, people didn't cause that. That wasn't someone's choice that caused that disaster. That was just a bad thing that happened to people. So, moral or natural evil, you can put some of it back on the teaching, God going for a teaching mechanism of, hey, this person will not donate their food supplies or like their money if they have not been hungry themselves. And so then if God can put them in a position where they've been hungry, and so now they understand to do more good. That works for some natural evil, some of it not necessarily. So then natural evil can also be a product of, again, actually relating back to free will. A table only functions as a table if it is a strong, sturdy object that can hold things on. If it can't hold things, it doesn't work as a table. If you have a table that can hold things, it will be unpleasant to your shins if you ever collide with it. You cannot have both. So, to exist in a world where you have, where choices matter, where you can make a table and have good that responds like that, the world has to follow consistent rules, and people's actions in the face of those rules have to have meaningful consequences, relating back to the free will and the variation that I was talking about earlier. If you don't have that variation and the ability for the or at least the possibility of that variation, you don't get you don't get meaning, you don't get the good. And so that means that as a consequence of that consistent world, it has to be consistent, which means if you stand in the path of lava, unfortunately, lava's got to be consistent, and you won't survive. That's a local evil, and it's your choice to be there has to matter. And then our understanding of the world matters, and the good of like, oh, we now know where or where not lava might show up, and we can maybe do cool, good things with lava, like generating power. But for all these goods, there has the possibility of evil has to exist. And so, but again, so that's how you get around the problem of evil. Now, a consequence of getting around the problem of evil by saying it is in the pursuit of a greater good means that it is in the pursuit of a greater good, and we actually have a responsibility to pursue that good. So if we can do good, God has given us the ability to do good in the world, and when we choose that good, it is amplified. And God does not solve all evils so as to give us this opportunity and honor our choices, because our choices are in and of themselves good. And so there is suffering because we can fix that. on some, like, I'm not saying, we can solve, or any individual can solve all the world's problems, but collectively, if everybody was always doing good, we could. And God doesn't fix the problem because in the long run, or in God's view, it is better that we fix that problem. And the amount of goodness generated is vaster if we fix the problem rather than God just fixing the problem. And I know it's like, hey, I'm saying what's God is thinking here, and people can't know God's thoughts in that way. And in the general case, absolutely true. In this specific instance, we can say that it is better that that God thinks it is better, and so therefore it is better because God's always right. That God thinks that God has people solve these problems rather than God solve those problems because the problems exist. And if it wasn't better, if the evil didn't serve a greater purpose, if it wasn't in some way necessary, God would fix that problem. And we can see that sometimes that's true. That some evil will happen, it won't be better, and God will fix the problem. And those are miracles, and we see them. Not frequently, and we don't see them very frequently because, for the most part, we can do a greater good if we make those actions. So evil doesn't have to be a problem for our belief in God, but if we believe in an all-powerful, all-loving God, if evil's not a problem, it is a call to action that we have to follow to do good in the world. Thank you.